Hey everybody, I've recently become a fan of the Alternate History Hub channel on YouTube. Led by a fellow named Cody, this channel presents thorough, well-researched, and fascinating overviews of how history might have changed if certain events had played out differently. Some of the best scenarios on the Alternate History Hub channel are what if nukes never existed, what if South Korea won the Korean War, what if the Cold War never ended, Cody's summary of the Axis-controlled America in Philip K. Dick's novel The Man in the High Castle, and just for fun, what if Godzilla were real. Alternate History Hub does a really good job of objectively analyzing history, weighing up possibilities, and addressing the implications events might have on broader world politics. If you like history or alternate history fiction, you should check them out. Alternate History Hub also runs a semi-regular series in which Cody showcases user-submitted country ideas. Many of the countries imagined by viewers are highly creative and interesting, drawing upon vast possibilities from antiquity to the present day, and I thought I'd come up with some alternate country ideas of my own for the series. So far, I've come up with 7 nations emerging from 4 scenarios. One scenario spun itself off into a very detailed alternate path for the Cold War, and I had a lot of fun writing it. If any of you are interested in history, feel free to point out how silly or implausible any of my ideas are, and if you want to take any of these ideas and turn them into short fiction or a short film, I give you full permission as long as you credit me as the basic source. I hope you like my country ideas. Let's get to it. The Unified Democratic German Republic, the Alaskan Soviet Republic, and Texan-Berlin. In 1948, the starting year of Stalin's Berlin blockade in our timeline, the US neglects to deliver aid to West Berlin due to post-war austerity. Critically lacking in resources and effectively choked by the Soviets, the West Berlin government goes into hiding. Germany is quickly reunified, as it was much later in our timeline, but under Soviet-backed East German communism rather than the Western capitalism of today's Germany. However, during this bumpy transition, with West Germany falling due to lack of central leadership, in 1950, the US, in a decisive and risky move, spurred by guilt for not aiding West Berlin in the blockade, smuggles West Berlin's government out of the country in an Iran hostage crisis-style exfiltration. In 1951, Texas elects to host the Tibetan-style exiled West Berlin government due to the high proportion of self-identifying German Texans. In response to this perceived mockery, the Soviet Union invades Alaska in 1952, an event superficially similar to China's invasion of Alaska in the Fallout games. After a brief armed resistance, called the Soviet-American Skirmish, the US reluctantly cedes Alaska to the Soviets later that year, and does so for 3 reasons: as a form of appeasement, the fact that Russia once owned Alaska anyway, and the cultural and ethnic symmetry of the situation. Alaska still has a lot of ethnically Russian people and Russian cultural influences, just as Texas has many descendants of German immigrants. It was also made slightly easier by the fact that Alaska wasn't even a fully incorporated state at that point. In our timeline, Alaska didn't become a state until January 13, 1959. As you'd expect, Cold War tensions flared up dangerously, but declined again with, in 1953, the simultaneous formation of the sovereign states of Texan-Berlin and the Alaskan Soviet Republic. The Unified German Democratic Republic, or again, a unified communist Germany, had formed long before in 1950. Having a Soviet bloc country in North America was actually surprisingly good for world peace in the long term. As the US and Soviets both existed on the same continent, the threat of mutually assured destruction by nuclear warfare was a much more potent deterrent to full-on war. Nonetheless, the US was much more active, out of a sense of dented pride, in proxy wars of Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, and others, with the fall of Germany to communism adding more urgency to the Truman Doctrine of limiting communism's spread. While the US and Soviet Union never quite forgave each other for the Russian-American skirmish, the Soviet Union actually lasted into the mid-2000s in this timeline, the nuclear arms race slowed a little, and the space race, the other, less aggressive competition between the superpowers, got a healthy boost in longevity. Today, the communist UGDR remains a bastion of hard communism and is closely allied with China. Texan-Berlin remains a small but economically and socially healthy country, enjoying American assistance and a vibrant blend of Texan heritage and German culture from German expatriates. The Alaskan Soviet Republic became a short-lived economic dynamo in the 60s due to its abundant resources, which also assisted in the Soviet Union lasting longer, but fell into a long slump in the 70s. It only started to recover with the fall of the Soviet Union in 2004, whereupon Alaska willingly became an incorporated Russian territory again under the freshly capitalist Russia. Unfortunately, this caused the Alaskan bubble to burst. With the Putin administration in full swing, this oppressive ruler, who was both the final Soviet General Secretary and first post-Soviet president, is too close to home for America's comfort. As such, the United States, Texan-Berlin, and their allies are mired in a second Cold War with Putin's Russia, Russian Alaska, the Russia-friendly Germany, and their allies. People's Republic of India. A communist revolution begins in India in the 60s as a response to the gross inequity of the country's caste system. Because socialism's theoretical benefits of empowering workers and lifting up disenfranchised groups are more tangible in this context than in previous socialist revolutions, India's revolution is endorsed and supported by various Western civil rights activists. As such, from its formation, the People's Republic of India is communist but very America-friendly. In turn, America's very strong relations with communist India ensure that feminism and other civil rights movements progress almost unaltered, as only the dumbest American conservatives will associate civil rights with communism. America's close ties with the People's Republic of India result in a slightly lowered stigma towards socialism. The Cold War is a little less tense, with India acting as a mediator between the US and the Soviet Union and China. New Australia and Canberra. In 2015, almost the entirety of Australia secedes from the Australian Capital Territory to escape Prime Minister Tony Abbott and his intensely right-wing, conservative, heartless government. The ACT, henceforth called Canberra for simplicity, is geographically and diplomatically isolated from the rest of Australia, and Tony Abbott is Prime Minister of only Canberra, thus freeing New Australia from his terrible policies. Melbourne is designated as New Australia's capital, its state parliament is expanded to a federal level, and a new Australian PM is elected. Canberra is eventually reabsorbed into New Australia, and Tony Abbott will be forever remembered as the Australian George W. Bush, and for whom we made a whole new country to get rid of him. The Federation of Antarctican Corporatocracies. Private oil and mining corporations expand their industrial operations in Antarctica, which causes friction in the global community regarding territorial boundaries and sovereignty, not to mention the environment. The US, China, Australia, and some other developed nations grant their biggest mining corporations some of their Antarctican territory, thus indirectly claiming their sovereignty of their respective territories, but due to the sheer difficulty of policing borders on the continent, most other countries leave the corporations to their own devices. Many mining corporations set up small corporate colonies on the coast and hire PMCs as militias to assist in expeditions and protect their economic interests and perceived national boundaries. Antarctica is now peppered with squabbling capitalist city-states that exist in a legal gray area regarding their nationhood status. So, those are my country ideas. I had a lot of fun writing them, and I hope you enjoyed them. I put a lot of work into the alternate Berlin blockade scenario, so I hope it's at least a little plausible. Thanks for watching. Cheers.